Okay. Hello, all. We're gonna do a different thing. We're gonna do a 1v1 debate. We haven't done one of those in a while. I'm excited to have the people here. I will just bring them off stage and we'll just get to it. But these two fantastic individuals have challenged each other, right, on the battlefield of ideas. We love that for them. And yeah, so I think we're gonna have a good time. It's gonna be on AI and its role in schools, which I think is a very timely subject matter, and possibly quite consequential. Honestly, for legislative purposes, for policy, what direction we go in could be quite huge. And sorry, just like now I'm just spitballing off the top of my head. Sorry, 1 second. It's just that I think that yeah, I can see that the AI being used for some people rather than others. Others get like teachers, right? Like this is an interesting thing in terms of a policy. So I'm very curious as to what these two individuals will say about it. So this is going to be a more structured thing than we usually do, than Joe is used to on this channel, certainly, right? He's used to being thrown in with fucking animals here. And but instead we got rules. I guess I'll read out the format for the audience. We will have 10 minutes each for opening statements, so 20 minutes altogether. A 40-minute discussion, and 10 minutes for closing, so 5 minutes each if each of the individuals, and then a 10-minute wrap-up portion. Yeah, I don't anticipate we're going to have much trouble. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep myself on screen or off screen. I'm pretty sure. Actually, hold on. I actually don't know the answer to this. If I'm off screen as a host, can you guys still hear me? Let's find out. One second. I don't know.
I don't hear him.
Okay, you didn't hear me. All right, never mind. So you can't hear me. I might still just keep myself off screen and come on screen when you need me. Maybe, I don't know. Well, I'll figure it out. Yeah, let's jump into it. Which one won the coin toss? I'm sorry, guys.
I think the option was that I was going to do the opening statement as the start, and then SteamRift will be the first to respond after opening statements.
Okay, all right.
And I do, Joe, Prime, if you don't mind, I would like to just sort of put one preface on this, if that's all right. So I do work in AI professionally. This debate is a true debate. We're arguing positions, not necessarily what we hold. So I'm just saying this because I actually work with AI every day, and I'm arguing a position. I'll end by saying I appreciate Joe inviting me to this. I've been looking forward to it.
Okay, absolutely. I'm looking forward to this as well. All right, so I got a handy dandy timer here. And so Joe, take it away.
Wait, we still have to say the question, right?
I guess we should tell everybody what we're talking about.
I thought that was yeah, okay, sure, fair enough. Yeah. Let me read the prompt. 1 second, please. Okay. Should public schools be allowed to use AI systems that materially affect students without externally defined limits? Clarifications. Public schools, I guess you mean public schools, government-funded primary and secondary education institutions, materially affect students, which means significantly influence academic placement, discipline, assessment, tracking, or access to opportunities. 3, externally defined limits, which would be constraints set by entities outside the individual school, school boards, state agencies, or law. Allowed, what is allowed would be permitted as a matter of policy or authority. Does that good?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So 1 second, let me pull up this timer again. Okay. Let's see, reset it. Okay, and go.
So at the heart of this question is not whether artificial intelligence can be accurate, efficient, or even fairer than individual humans. The real issue is authority, specifically who is legitimately authorized to make value judgments that materially shape students' lives and under what conditions that authority can be justified. When decisions materially affect students, decisions about academic placement, discipline, access to opportunities, or long-term educational trajectories, we are not merely processing information. We're making normative judgments. We're deciding what counts as success, what risks are acceptable, what fairness requires, and how responsibilities should be distributed. These are not technical questions, they're moral and political ones. And moral authority cannot be outsourced to systems that lack accountability. AI systems by design interpret students and teachers through limited, task-specific data models. They do not see people as whole persons embedded in families, communities, cultures, rights, developmental histories, and institutions. Instead, they reduce individuals to measurable proxies, test scores, attendance records, behavioral flags, assignment completion rates, or demographic correlations, among other things. This reduction isn't accidental, but it's foundational to how these systems function. That limitation matters because education is not merely an optimization problem. A student is not a bundle of variables to be maximized. Education involves judgment about growth over time, resilience, context, and competing goods. Those judgments cannot be fully captured by predictive systems trained on historical data. Consider what it means to materially affect a student, right? Placement into an advanced track may open doors, but quietly close ones. A disciplinary recommendation may alter how a student is perceived for years. A risk score can follow students across institutions. These decisions shape futures, they signal expectations, and among other things, they influence how students understand themselves. To exercise authority over such outcomes requires more than pattern recognition. It requires legitimacy. Legitimacy comes from accountability. A legitimate decision maker must be identifiable, contestable, and morally answerable to the people affected. They must be capable of explaining not just what decision was made, but why it was justified in the light of competing values. They must be subject to correction, appeal, and public standards. AI systems cannot meet this criteria. An AI system does not stand before a parent, a teacher, or a community to justify a decision. It cannot explain itself in moral terms. It cannot be cross-examined in a school board meeting. It cannot be voted out, retrained by consent, or be held responsible in a meaningful way. Responsibility always collapses back onto humans. But when authority is obscured behind automated systems, accountability becomes evasive. This is why the question is not whether AI reduces bias better than humans. Humans are biased. Humans are imperfect. Humans make incomplete decisions every day in schools. This is not in dispute. The question is whether decision-making authority is exercised by agents who can be questioned, corrected, and morally justified, or by systems optimized for prediction rather than judgment. Prediction is not the same as evaluation. AI systems excel at predicting outcomes based on past patterns, but value judgments require deciding whether those outcomes are desirable, fair, or appropriate given the specific circumstances of a student's life. And that distinction is crucial. For example, an AI system may recommend a student for an honors program based on performance data and prior achievements. On paper, this may look like a success story, but the system does not know whether the student is caring for siblings at home, managing chronic health issues, or experiencing instability that makes additional workload harmful rather than beneficial. These are not edge cases. These are the realities of every student's lives in their particular context. A human educator can weigh those factors. A human institution can deliberate about them. A human decision maker can change their mind when presented with new information. An AI system cannot meaningfully do so, not because it's malice or actively evil, but because it is structurally incapable of moral reasoning. And even an AI system are used with good intentions to standardize decisions, remove individual prejudice, or increase efficiency, they are still embedded value choices. choices about what data matters, choices about how success is defined, choices about how acceptable trade-offs between equity, efficiency, and risk. These choices are often made upstream by developers, vendors, or distant administrators far removed from the students whose lives are affected. Without externally defined limits, these systems risk becoming de facto authorities, even if they are formally labeled as recommendation tools. Over time, recommendations harden into defaults, defaults become expectations, and expectations become institutional behavior. This is not a hypothetical concern. We've seen it in other domains like policing, credit scoring, hiring, and healthcare triage, among others. Systems introduced as advisory gradually acquire authority because they are often seen as objective, neutral, or data-driven. Human decision makers defer to them not because they're correct, but because challenging them requires effort, confidence, and institutional backing. In public schools, this dynamic is especially dangerous because students do not have equal power to resist or appeal. Students cannot meaningfully consent to be governed by opaque systems. Families often lack the resources and technical literacy to challenge algorithmic decisions, and marginalized communities disproportionately bear the consequences of institutional experimentation. This is why external limits are necessary. Externally defined limits set by school boards, legislators, or democratic oversight bodies, among other examples that this can be done, serve crucial function. They ensure an AI remains advisory rather than authoritative in decisions that materially affect students. They preserve the principle that value judgments belong to accountable institutions, not automated systems. And that I yield my time.
Oh, okay. All right. 3 minutes left. Let me reset that. Reset. Stop talking. Reset. Okay. All right. So please, that was fantastic. And we'll go to our friend SteamRift. Go ahead.
All right. Well, and to clarify, what we're not talking about whether or not limits should exist. The question is, should those external limits be set by back to the definitions? I'm just going to tighten this up again, just what we started with here. Constraints set by entities outside of the individual school, such as school boards, state agencies, or the law. So external limits are bad. That's just sort of how that one is, and we'll go through some reasons why. So 3 reasons start with, first, the authority should follow responsibility. Second, decentralized experimentation is how learning actually happens. And third, centralized rules don't reduce risk, they scale it. Each one of these independently fails the case for external limits. Taken together, they collapse it. We'll start with authority flowing from responsibility. Schools bear the consequence of the decisions. They answer to parents, students, elected school boards, state law, and courts. When outcomes go bad, schools absorb the fallouts politically, legally, and reputationally. External limits break that alignment. You end up with responsibility without authority and compliance without judgment. That is a perverse incentive structure. It rewards box checking instead of outcomes and encourages administrators to optimize for regulatory safety rather than student success. If we don't trust schools to exercise discretion under existing accountability, then the problem isn't AI, it's that we don't trust the public education at all. And external limits don't solve the problem, they just move it further away from the people who actually experience the consequences. Second, decentralized experimentation is essential for learning. We do not yet know how AI should be used in education. Anyone who claims otherwise is pretending to have knowledge they don't have. Education improves through variation, experimentation, and comparison. That requires freedom to try the different approaches in different contexts and to learn from what works and what fails. Part of the reason why our nation is so great is we have 50 states that have the autonomy to behave as they wish, and each one of them has the autonomy to set their own educational objectives, directives, and such. And that allows for us to learn a lot cross-state about the way students learn and how we can improve outcomes. Externally imposed limits freeze assumptions early. They homogenize outcome behavior before best practices exist, and they can penalize unconventional approaches that might actually succeed in specific communities. Standards should be the output of the experience, not the precondition for permission. The moment you require externally defined limits before schools are allowed to experiment, you substitute discovery with bureaucracy and learning with compliance. Third, centralized rules create systemic risk, not safety. The other side's going to talk, Joe mentioned the scale of the problems that these AI systems would have, and he conflated external limitations versus whatever the school may set. This isn't an argument that the school should have no rules that they set for themselves internally. For example, if they were to set a policy regarding the use of AI in grading and the way it could and could not be used, that is still the option at the school level. Again, going back to point one, because they have the accountability for the action. So they need to have the authority to be able to address it as they see fit. We've seen repeatedly when standardized testing regimes and top-down education mandates are applied, they're failures. I know Joe likes to argue quite a bit about marginalized communities and all these different things. And the tools that he's advocating here for are the same types of things that standardized testing creates problems for across marginalized communities. So if we want to live in a society where we're not exposing ourselves to systemic oppression, we need to make sure that each school has the autonomy to set its own policy, not to have some outside thoughts forced upon it. This is an argument against accountability. It's not an argument against transparency, and it's certainly not an argument against fairness. It's an argument against premature centralization. And since we're speaking about this in the context of education, which is typically in the US a government function, the fact of the matter is our country is not structured to have one uniform standard. And that's not a bug, it's a feature. And we should apply that to schooling and allow the schools the autonomy to be able to use AI and apply it in the new and exciting ways that are available, and give them the autonomy to succeed or fail based off of their own directions, not having external forces thrust upon them. So schools already operate under dense accountability structures. What they need is freedom to learn, adapt, and improve, not externally imposed rules that assume we already know the right answers. For those reasons, public schools should not be allowed, so for those reasons, we should not have external limits on the use of AI in the school. That should be autonomous at the school level. To close, that's the core argument. The position my opponent is raising is that we should have limits outside of the school setting. And for the three reasons I listed, I think that would not just be a poor choice. I think it would be awful. With that, with that, I yield. How brief was I, Prime? Was I not concise?
You had 4 minutes and 47 seconds left. So you did better than Joe. All right. You won that
I like
much. Okay. So I think I will actually take myself off screen rather than just sit here for 40 minutes, like looking pretty, right? I mean, that would help.
You do look pretty
ratings,
though.
but yeah. So I'll only come on screen, to say a thing because you won't hear me otherwise. But I don't anticipate much of a problem here. Like I said previously, it'll be 40 minutes. I'll put a banner up here as well. Let's get.
All right, Joe. So I guess a question to you that is not immediately obvious based off of what you said is, at what level should the external limits be applied? I didn't hear you state versus federal versus anything, and maybe that was intentionally vague. But with that, I'll await your response.
Yeah, as you mentioned in your opening statement, we already have the functions of a dense accountability structure. So I think the dense accountability structure that you were describing in your opening statement are the things such as, but not limited to, school boards, laws, Department of Education, certain legislative contexts. So sometimes a state legislator may intervene on a very particular type of clarification within the school system. But yeah, I think all of those things, as you mentioned, the already existent dense accountability structures would be the external individual entities in these cases.
So outside of the school district, so the school itself. All right, excellent. So do you acknowledge that there are risks with forcing a standardized policy across multiple schools that may or may not actually have the same foundation?
Of course. The answer was yes.
Yeah, I heard you. I'm not sure where to go from here, if I'm being candid.
Sure. I can elaborate a little bit, right? Like, we understand that there are risks when entering into any new thing. But when you have something like AI that is external from the human existence, It's very tricky for me. I'm very questioning about the idea, or I guess where the line is. When does something be strictly an advisory, and when does it become authoritative de facto? Like, this is why I think these external limits are necessary. Things set by school boards, legislatures, democratic oversight bodies, like I mentioned in my opening, they help AI remain an advisory thing rather than something that is authoritative by design.
So, for example, when I was growing up, we had these things called scantrons. Are you familiar with this technology?
Yes.
Okay, right. So those that aren't familiar with it, it's a piece of paper. If you use a pencil, it'll mark a spot, and then a teacher can take 100 tests and just scan through them and have that graded. I think at a basic level, we could argue that that's artificial intelligence. I think it's a lazy argument, and we're so far past that. But for example, as it applies to grading, would you agree that it would be a tremendous advantage for teachers to be able to, for example, use a language model to apply a grading standard to help the teacher be able to grade, call it 100 assignments simultaneously? Would you agree that's an advantage? And if so, what is the risk that you view as problematic on that?
I think is the duty of the teacher or educator to evaluate those things themselves. This is what they're getting paid to do within their profession. There are already multiple different types of courses and professional development dedicated to this very question of how do you manage large course loads across multiple subjects. This is something that teachers are already trained to do. So I don't think AI would do anything to really add to it. It's already a system that works generally fairly well.
So let me ask you this. So, and I think as I was waiting on the question you said at the very end, scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, one being a failure. Where would you, five being dead center? How would you rate the current public education system?
In what way?
How is
In
how is it
context?
performing and educating students?
Um, for the most part, I would say it's fine for most people. I think the education system is working exactly as intended for an overwhelming majority of Americans.
Are you concerned about edge cases in marginalized communities?
Edge cases are always something to be considered, but they are not the norm.
Right. So one of the things that's a pretty exciting opportunity for AI is the ability to do individualized learning like no human can. For example, one of the complaints I'll hear from teachers, I'm assuming you've heard the same thing, is they get assigned too many students per class. They'd like fewer students so they could do a better job. I'm assuming you've heard that before.
Sure.
So a good friend of mine made him and a partner of his from Apple made a piece of software that does math-based tutoring. And what is particularly interesting about this isn't that it teaches math. It's not LLM based. It's completely proprietary in that sense. Is when a student gives an incorrect answer, it reverse understands where they went wrong and reteaches the concept from another angle to try to get them caught up. Not only has this been successful with students with normal learning abilities, let's say, or more neurotypical, I believe is the term it's that used. It's been particularly helpful for students with disabilities. And so what we've seen is an application, AI has been able to do a far better job doing one-on-one teaching. For example, they did a case study. They had a young girl, I forget her exact grade, I think it was third, and she was behind, I believe it was 2 years on her math capabilities. And using the software in a period of 6 months, she caught up a year and a half. This is a student that was on a 1-to-6 ratio who had every resource available under that system, and the addition of this tool radically changed outcomes. If we have a system with external limits, things like this would be prevented because it creates additional obstacles for innovation to actually improve outcomes for students. I'm assuming we wouldn't think that outcomes for students improving is a bad outcome.
I'm not buying what you're selling. I
Okay.
think that external limits are completely necessary for a situation like this, because while you're describing something that might be considered optimal, you are only describing it in the particular context of that one student. So every single student's going to have different types of experiences, different types of experiences with the subject matter itself, and then their own personal stuff. So I guess the question that kind of comes up to me when I hear this, like, if you have an AI system that materially affects a student in a harmful way, who has the authority to set limits on what the system can do before the harm occurs.
Well, let's go back up on this logic chain a little bit earlier. My proposition is if you add external limits, you prevent innovation. Here we've seen software, AI software be able to, and since this is a debate, I mean, I'm happy to provide the source later. I'm just assuming we'll take on good faith here. This software, it's a case study, it's verifiable, it's been published. This particular software tool, all innovation relies on being disruptive and creating new projects and products. And when we have a situation where there are external limits, this could limit the ability of schools, likely would limit the ability of schools to apply at least some tools. And who's to say those aren't the tools that would help the kids in those districts? So I guess I'll ask you this, you know, how would you avoid external limits preventing innovative software from helping students at scale?
Because you have humans as accountable measures. So humans are the accountability factor for the entire process. They're accountable at the school level, they're accountable at the legislative level. That could be school board legislation, all the way up to government legislature. AI doesn't have the capacity to be cross-examined. AI doesn't have the capacity to explain its argumentation on moral grounds as to why this makes this thing good.
What makes you think that?
Unless you can demonstrate how can AI make a moral judgment on a student. Does it have the capacity to do that? I'm asking you directly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. By any framing I would think of, absolutely. It would, of course, have to be built to do that. However, for example, one of the things that's the most interesting, if I may, I published, and it's not a particularly I did it academically. It's more of a blog post than anything, but I did a presentation. I came up with a first theory of AI. This is me, Josh's first theory of AI. And essentially, one of the biggest surprises about these language models in particular, there's lots of artificial intelligence, language models are a flavor of it. It's better at understanding humans and the human experience than I ever would have imagined. And I'll clarify that I think it's because it's actually ingested the human experience for so many different people in so many different ways. It is capable, as we understand it, of being more empathetic, understanding morality, working within specific frameworks, of actually being able to apply all of those things that you feel like the cold, hard robot won't feel.
I think you're kind of misrepresenting a position that I hold. I'll make it a bit more clear that limits do not reject AI outright. They're not going to deny its potential usefulness. AI can assist educators in identifying patterns, flagging concerns, and surfacing information that might otherwise be missed, as you even described in the idea of sort of a better way of explaining how somebody got something wrong. But assistance isn't authority, and information is not judgment. Tools are not decision makers. So when we're talking about things that are materially affecting students, we have to be very conscious and aware that the only person who we can be accountable and keep accountable are other humans. And the only place that humans exist in this context would be in accountability measures. Like the institution, we are in human institutions. We are not in AI institutions. So because we are in human institutions built and constructed by humans, humans must be the accountable measure. And you mentioned something.
If I may, because you, all right, appreciate that. I'm not, so a distilled claim, and just first, if I ever misrepresent you, please always correct me. It's never my intention to misrepresent somebody's saying. Two, the external limits preventing, like essentially giving schools guardrails from external requires them, it necessarily limits the amount of innovative, amount they can apply innovation. Meaning, if an edict from on high, whatever that external group is, says, you can only use it here, or you cannot use it this way, or whatever those limitations are. Now you're telling every engineer, every software company, every fan of education, everybody who wants to make cool gadgets to help kids learn better and help adults learn better. But in this context, we're talking about schools. They're going to have to work within those guardrails, even if, so for example, the math tutoring software I was referring to, it's not from a big company. It's not going to have a lot of the same sort of checking the boxes that larger companies will. Now, what's funny about this particular example is I live in Las Vegas. That's why I have the strip behind me. There is a AI powered or technology enabled math tutoring one-on-one system that at least some of the schools here use, and the teachers hate it and the students don't use it. And why is this the case? Because there's an external policy applied to all of the schools at the individual level that they have to use the thing. So I guess, how would you navigate that? Does the question make
That's
sense?
sure. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're asking what happens when students and teachers are not jiving with something that's considered a standard?
Well, no. So I'll give you a real clean example. Let's say
Sure.
I'm a principal at a school, and I'm
Hmm.
having a meeting with all of the math teachers, and I say, we're going to bring these math scores up, and I've got these tools. If I have anything externally limiting me from bringing something AI enabled, that means the best tools for the market or the best options for my students might be held back or inhibited because of this external force. And so that's at the axis here. It's not whether or not there should or shouldn't be limitations on human accountability. It's about whether or not the school should be making the decision. And I think ultimately the school should be making the decision, not anyone outside of that.
How does the principal know that these things are going to help improve scores? How does he come to that conclusion?
Let's assume for a moment, if it in case it and unless it hurts your argument, let's assume for a moment he doesn't know. He's of the opinion it would help. That's his best guess. That's the
Okay.
decision. Him as an educator for 20 years, he sees this. He's seen it with a few students. He's done whatever his internal process is, and he wants to roll it out. But
Okay.
wouldn't you know it, 3 weeks earlier, the any one of those groups that you've referred to, they pass a law, they enact a local measure, whatever it is, that says you cannot use a tool unless it's on an approved vendor list. Now that's easy to sell at a legislative level. Oh, well, we only want approved ones. But then it becomes regulatory gatekeeping, and it prevents otherwise very viable tools from getting in the hands of students. And more importantly, and I think that this is one of my three pillars, is the teachers, in that case, like the principal's accountable for the performance of the school. Like that's their job. Why should someone else tell them how to do it?
I think it'll be incredibly irresponsible for a school administrator, in this case, that's what principals are, they're administrators, to present to their colleagues a tool that they believed works without any type of evidence to suggest why they believe it to be so. It sounds
Not the
like,
point, but go ahead.
I mean, it's part of it, right? Because we're talking about something that's materially affecting students. In this case, we're trying to raise their grades higher to a point that's substantive. So when I'm hearing that, I'm thinking if a principal is presenting a piece of technology, whatever the case may be, that's trying to materially affect students by raising their grades, and he has the argument, the strong feeling and inclination that is going to do that, then I think he needs something a little bit higher than just vibes. It sounds like he would need something external to present as a reinforcement to this data. And that would even be, in my eyes, the argument that he would make as to why this vendor ought to be recognized. Because if the vendor is not recognized, that's easily something that they could argue based upon the evidence he gathers externally and brings forth towards the math educators. Because then he needs just the math educators on their side, and then they can take that up to the school board, with collaboration to the legislature to be like, hey, we have compelling evidence that this is going to help our school raise the grades of these students. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I believe I understand the position. The foundation, and I'm going to repeat back roughly what I'm hearing is you view that as a feature, not a bug. Now the principal, armed with the support of the math teachers who he showed it to, then it works, whatever. Now he goes and he appeals to some authority externally to say, "Mother, may I?" The problem with that is it's antithetical to innovation. I'm a technologist and an engineer at
And
heart. AI provides the opportunity for tools that have never existed before to help enhance learning in ways we've never had possible. So to me, any limitation, any external pushback, any extra step itself is antithetical to progress.
would it be easier or more difficult for a principal to persuade a math department if he had information and data external from himself? Basically, what I'm saying is if he presented the math department with a bunch of different companies and different entities that also argue in favor of this and have data to show the results that this also works for them, would that make the principal's argument stronger towards the math department or weaker?
So I'm going to answer. I don't see the relevance, but I believe it would make it stronger.
Okay, so you would then agree that we would need some type of external interaction in order to help make our arguments more compelling, correct?
No, I don't think we need it. At its core, I believe the requirement to actually go out and do that is antithetical to progress. So,
So
for
why
example,
would you say yes then to the question, if that's what you believe?
because you asked a hypothetical and I didn't want to give you a bad faith evasiveness. I answered it, and before that I said I don't see how it's applicable.
I can
So,
connect it if you'd like.
please.
Yeah. So we're talking about decisions that materially affect students.
Agreed.
Test grades are an example of something that can materially affect students. An A and an F can change a student's trajectory.
Yep.
So if a principal is making the argumentation, I believe that this thing works. I believe that this AI works. And I don't have any else to reinforce it. I just know that it works. I can't explain to you to the math department why it works, but this is what I see. I see in these examples, it works. We should try it. In my eyes, I don't think a math department would be compelled with that because we're talking about materially affecting students' outcomes. And I think we would
That's one
need
prong of it.
something. We would need something higher than vibes, correct? Just the vibes of the principal.
Well, what we're talking about is external limits. And the fact of the matter is, in that example, if the principal goes to the math department, they say they want to do it, they should just be able to do it. There shouldn't be any external friction. The entire decision-making process should happen within the four corners of the school, not incumbent on anything else.
So parents don't have the ability to consent in this regard.
Parents are the accountability method for the school.
Right, but I'm asking you, so if the principal okays it and the math teachers okay it and they do it, and if the parents go to the principal and they say, well, who did you speak to confirm it? And they just said the math teachers. And they said, well, who did the math teachers go to confirm it? And they say the principal. How can a parent figure out if they're honest? How can a parent figure out that this is correct? Do they just trust the principal and the math teachers here?
I like your example a lot. So in that example, imagine, let's just fork it a little bit. So let's say scenario one is the scenario you gave, and I'll just recap the parts that I'm going to mirror. Principal says, let's use the math software. Teachers say, let's use the math software. Parents say, holy shit, my kids are stupid now. I hate this. Now they go and they yell at the principal and they yell at the math teacher. Great. That's the closed loop. Scenario B. Principal wants to use software. External policy says he can't. Teachers want to use the software. External policy says he can't. Students are suffering, even though demonstrably everywhere else in the nation, the software is working great. Now the teachers go and bitch, and there's no one local in that account, in that ecosystem, that's actually that the buck is stopping with, where they're accountable. So the decision to make these choices is already largely entrusted with the educational system anyway, and we should let them essentially live and die by their own decisions and let them have the reward and the risk associated with making those decisions. Does that clarify the point?
I'm asking you, in what you presented, if the principal says it's okay and the math teacher say it's okay, and then the parent says, why do you know this is correct? How do you know this is going to help my students' grades? The math teachers say, well, the principal told us. And the principal says, I told the math teachers and they agreed. How can a parent determine that that is correct? Just by having their student go through the program? Is that what you're saying?
Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to answer your question. I don't see the relevance to an external limitation. To answer your question, that a lot of software in general, and especially with AI, is black box. There can be visibility in it. There's any number of reasons why, any number of ways to deal with some of those issues. But if we have students and teachers making decisions about how they're educating students, and the students' parents are upset, the parents can go back to the school, and the school has the accountability, and it's a complete accountability loop. If you force something on the school external, now the teachers and the school have this easy out. Well, parents, we know your kids are struggling and we'd love to help, but the state says we can only use approved vendors, and then they won't approve any vendors, which is exactly how related structurally the Nevada legislature passed law about house sharing or Airbnb, like vacation rental type stuff. And they said, okay, well, each county has to make a process. And then Clark County, where Vegas is, didn't make a process. So they said you have to step through these hoops. There's this external limitation, but then the folks charged with enforcing it and creating the infrastructure for it just didn't. And so in that case, you can't go to the school board and elect new ones. You can't go do that because you don't have the same accountability there.
I'm asking, I'll try it one more time. I'm just asking, how does a parent know that the principal's conclusion is correct if the principal refers to the math teachers for approval? And then when the parents go to the math teachers, they say, well, we agree with the principal. How can the parent, before the program even comes into place, know if the principal is correct and they ought to do this and they're okay with it? How can parents meaningfully consent? And are they even allowed to meaningfully consent?
They've already consented by virtue of the election process and how this hiring process of the schools. They're already participating in that ecosystem. And in terms of deciding whether it is or isn't right, I think that's at the core of what's important here. We don't know what is and is not the right way to apply this. So putting any enforcement of any external pressures on individual schools to have policy when we don't even know what good policy is. I mean, this is the level of irresponsible this position is. It's saying, let's set policy when we won't know for 5 to 10 years what good policy even looks like, at least.
Hey, fellas, so try to get a bit of clarification because you guys were stuck on this point, right? Like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, right? But it sounds like when you're saying meaningful consent, you're like, how do I know these systems like are actually producing correct results, right? Like a parent can't do a technical evaluation, right? They're being told a new system is being put into place, right? And it like dispenses math truths, okay, right? But how would they be able to judge that? And what Joe seems to be saying is that, well, you go to the principal says, I think it's pretty good. I mean, the math teachers say it's good, and then you just go around in a circle, right? That there's no way of holding them accountability. So do you understand? Does that make it a bit more clear, Joshua, SteamRift?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is they're accountable through all of the ways that already exist, right? The school answers to the parents, the students, the elected school boards, and the fact of the matter, like the taxpayers are involved. Like there's systems of accountability there. So if the principal does it, so like I feel like you're asking a question for which, like, you set up a circular argument and then you ask me to answer circular argument, and I don't even know what it has to do with whether or not there should be external limits on this. I let me ask you this before we go any further on any of it. Sure. How does this touch on an external limit?
Absolutely. Because you mentioned something that I thought was really interesting, and I hope maybe we'll have some time to get to it. You said that parents, by virtue of their participation in the education system, essentially consent to the actions of the school. But what's confusing about that to me is that parents don't choose the principal. The school board does. So
who elects the school board?
People. But
okay. What people?
Anyone, not just
people
parents.
In the community, right? Correct. So sure, parents and non-parents in that community for that school district,
right? So does that mean that just by their participation in the school board, the principal has full consent to do whatever they want because that's just they voted for the school board member, therefore the principal is the extension of the school board member? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, I'm gonna ask you what this has to do with external limits.
Because that's the external limits, right? The school board is external from the school itself. The voting population is external from the school itself. But you're saying now that parents just by virtue of voting for a school board member. And there are some, and the voting percentage of schools is incredibly low. So it's a very small group of people who are voting for school board members. And then it seems like just by that small participation group, or participating in the school just by your child going, that means that the principal has unilateral authority to do whatever they want without input or regard from the parent. But I don't think that's what you mean, unless it is.
I mean, let me ask you this. Do you think that as it sits today, there are feedback mechanisms for parents to principals?
No.
All right. So let's just say that that's the case. The discussion we're having currently is about whether or not there should be external limits on the use of AI in school. So how do I get there from what you're now? I have heard you say, you know, well, grading impacts students. I agree with you. It checks those boxes. If we look at this as a multi-prong test, we have to check all of the prongs. One prong, and if even one prong is fatal, it's fatal. One prong I'm not seeing is, how does this further or disprove the claim that the schools should or should not have external limits on the use of AI?
What I'm saying here, and I guess the core of everything that I said earlier, is that decisions that materially affect students require legitimate authority to exercise value judgment, and that authority must be accountable to the people it affected. So when I think back to the parent to teacher thing with the math teachers, right? I'm thinking that in this case, the principal is accountable. The principal is absolutely accountable for their actions. But if your argument or variation of that is the agreement comes all the way to the school board, that would mean that someone external from the school itself should be accountable before the principal. So the line goes to the principal being accountable, and then also the line is connected to the school board member. So both of those groups are on the hook. So to ask you, if it's found that this math program is harmful to students, and it's found that this program creates negative results, who do we remove? Do we remove the principal? Do we remove the school board, or both?
I believe that the natural head on the chopping block is the school itself, right? That's the principal, that's the teachers, right? So what I'm not hearing from you, so for example, the position you've taken in this debate is that the school board or something like that, something external to the school, should set an external limit. My position is none of that should happen. Ultimately, it's up to the schools. The schools are the ones that are going to have the parents complaining. The schools are going to be the ones that are fighting for the budget. They're the ones where the school board. Now, the school board itself, I don't think should be setting the policy. However, it is one of the accountability mechanics for that principal themselves. So since the principal is already on the hook for liability and for accountability on it, they should be empowered to be able to use whatever AI innovation they see fit within the four corners of the policies of the school and how they've been authorized to behave, not
10
unlimited.
minutes left. 10 minutes left, and John.
Oh, man.
So again, so it sounds like you're saying the principal should be let go, but the members of the school board who voted in that principal should be able to have the choice to select another principal.
So my understanding, and
what you believe,
my understanding, my understanding, and I believe this is roughly the way this works, is that the school board is who the principals are accountable to. Is that your understanding as well, or no?
No, the principals aren't accountable to the school board. They're accountable to their school. But when it comes to removing the principal, that is something at the discretion of the school board.
Then they are accountable to the school board.
So they're accountable to something.
If someone
external.
can fire you, then you're accountable to them.
So they're accountable to an external entity, but that external entity cannot create limits to what can and cannot be done.
I mean, they have a lane that they function in properly. The question is, should the school be able to decide on an individual basis what their AI policy is and how they will or will not apply it? And so I feel like you're trying to strain an argument here.
No, I'm just trying to see the connection here. Like you mentioned.
Okay, I'll do it.
This example is good because
why are we using this example?
because it comes to the core of the entire question, right? Like
Okay.
you're saying that, okay, the principal can make unilateral decisions about what tools can and cannot be used in the classroom, right?
That the
And
school can
the school
may
can
or may
use
not
it.
be delegated to the principal. Maybe they set some AI thing, maybe whatever, but it's at that individual school level.
Gotcha. Even though the school board determines who the principal is, the school board does not have the right to determine limits to the principal. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
But they do have the ability to let them go. Is that what you're saying?
I believe structurally that is correct.
So they can't tell them what the limits ought to be, but they do have the discretion to let them go for essentially whatever reason. That doesn't seem very fair, right?
Well, I mean, so I'm going to try to frame this more squarely in the prompt. The school board setting a policy for the principal. I'll give you an example. You can only use school district approved AI tools, and those the ones that are the only ones approved are the ones that the school district gets a kickback for. So maybe not the best ones, but certainly the ones that are those are the only ones you can use. So now there's a free one, totally free one. The principal wants to use it and they can't because the administrators say you have to do that. And then the math scores fail, like they do worse because they don't have that. And then the school board fires the principal for the policy the school board set out. They got in that case, the principal got set up to fail. Agree? Disagree?
No, I think there's more tools that are available than just AI. So if the principal doesn't explore other options, if he knows if I am going to use artificial intelligence, I must use these things, and I'm not allowed to use these things, then it's a duty of the principal to figure out other ways in collaboration with, in this case, the math department, to figure out other ways that are possible if there are restraints to
Right.
AI.
And I'm saying all those restraints are horseshit. The schools should be empowered to make the decisions that they want to best serve the students in their district or in their school and in their classrooms.
Right, but the limitations in this case are allowing for expression. You're allowing in this case, you're allowing the principals and the math teachers to innovate in a way and not rely on artificial intelligence, not rely on technological systems to answer the problems for them. Because the problem in their case, like it or not, has some level of accountability for them as individual educators. So it's their duty to figure it out in collaboration with other humans. And passing the buck to AI in this case is incredibly risky. It's risky in my eyes insofar as it being unproven, which was the point that I was trying to make. There's no way.
I mean, there's no reason the school couldn't just say we are only working. Like the school could set whatever policy it wants. Imagine the scenario, if you will, Joe. Imagine a year from now, every school in this country had its own policy. A lot of them would be similar, I'm sure. Some would be different. And then 1 year from now, we had a nice little conference right here in fabulous Las Vegas. We have educational conferences here all the time. And we all discussed what worked and what didn't. How do you think the next educational year would look for everyone? Would it be better, worse?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so let's imagine in my world where there are no external limits. So every school makes its own policy. So we'd expect some of them would have similar, right? Oh, well, we're going to use it for grading, not use it for grading. It'd be like a bell curve. There'd be maybe 5 or 10. Okay. The conclusion is if at the end of a year we had all of this data on how the schools applied different policies, we'd have as many data points as we'd have schools and then some. So we could make super informed decisions and really understand exactly what's working, what's not. If we had, for example, taking it to the other extreme, Federal Department of Education said you can only use it if it's on an approved list, now we would have a very homogenous thought, but like thought homogeny across all of the educational institutions, and everybody would be suffering from the same disadvantages of whatever that single edict was or whatever those constraints were. So don't you believe outcomes would be far better if we're able to individually experiment at the school level instead of having one sweeping policy across states or nationwide?
I'm not quite buying some of the premises, so I'm having a hard time.
That's great. Which premise do you have a problem with?
I think a better way to maybe approach this, I'll ask this very sort of directly. Should students' access to opportunities depend on whether a school adopts fewer safeguards?
How do you mean?
So I'll ask it again. Should a student's access to opportunities, access to honors courses, access to school lunch, access to tutoring, should that depend on whether their schools adopt fewer safeguards or more safeguards?
I mean, it sort of
Or
does, whether
either.
you like it or not. I don't think that the
And
two levers should be connected, but I think it's an immutable nature of the universe.
what do you mean?
So if, for example, a school takes, so let's assume that we don't know whether it's true if more safeguards or less safeguards are better. Premise one. We don't know if more is better or worse is better. That's fair?
Okay, sure.
Okay. So we don't know if, but a school goes with one school goes with one school goes with the other. By default, one of those schools made the decision that's limiting the opportunity for their students. Push back.
I guess.
You got like 90 seconds.
I don't. Yeah, I'm just not quite. So I'm not quite selling this. I'm not quite buying what you're selling here. Like we can agree that like material effect includes things like placement, discipline, and access to opportunities, right?
Yes.
Do you think like a single school should be free to delegate those decisions to AI without any external safeguards?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. 100%.
And then if two schools use both of those identical, one to one creates incredible success, one creates incredible failure, which one is the truth? Who should somebody trust? Should we trust the school that has the good outcomes, or should we trust the school that has the bad outcomes? If I'm a
So
parent choosing a school.
to understand your scenario, and I like the parental school choice, you're saying we have the same policies applied in two schools, but outcomes were different.
We're saying that two schools are adopting the same AI system for discipline. In one school, 100% of the students have been disciplined in some form of capacity that's led to 2 weeks of suspension at minimum. Every student in that school, 100%, has been suspended at minimum 2 weeks. In the other school, the exact same system yielded 0% of the students suspended, experiencing no disciplinary action from this AI system. If I'm a parent, how can I make the substantive choice that the first school is worse than the second?
I think we'd have to, at a minimum, start by defining what the policy was so we could look at it and then see how it played out.
So if I go to the principal and say, how did you determine why you use this AI? And the principal said, well, I trusted the math department's decision on this.
Oh, even different than that, what I'm saying is, what is the policy, right? So if the policy was we're going to use AI for disciplinary purposes, for example, we're going to have it review that.
So we're out of the general discussion. Unless we can continue on, I'm fine if you guys want to continue on with some more. But if not,
yeah, let me just if I could just close the thread. That if so, let's say we had the so my company's Big TB, and whenever I'm thinking of just an off the hand project, I'd say Big TB this big. So we have the Big TB student disciplinary review tool, and they took that. If we saw it, so I'm a systems engineer. If I saw data that different with the same software, I'd have a million questions about it. So I think that if as a good AI policy would be, if we see deltas like that, you got to dig into it. So I think I don't know if that is or is not an argument for. I don't see the argument for why we would want to outsource those decisions. And for example, using that, just to completely wrap this, if a system's capable of being that unpredictable, why would we want external limits saying you have to or cannot use stuff like that? Like that's part of the problem. That way, it's at least isolated to that individual school, not across district, states, country.
Yeah, I mean, I'm cool to wrap.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well then, We'll do closing statements, right? 5 minutes each. Which one goes first?
You can close if you want, stream, since I open. It's fine.
All right. Well, so you'll do. So we each get a closing statement. I'm assuming. So you go first. I'll get last word, or is it the other way around? Which would you like? Fine, either way.
I can close. It's fine then.
All right, go for it.
Sure thing.
Off you go.
Yeah. So the question that was presented today was essentially not whether AI can be useful in schools. I think we both were able to demonstrate that this is useful. Like the AI can be useful in schools, and or whether or not the data can help educators make better decisions. I think that was clearly obvious in the conversation. But the question is much narrower, right? Like, should public schools be allowed as a matter of policy to use AI systems that materially affect students without externally defined limits? So the conversation turns, for me, to authority and legitimacy, not efficiency or prediction accuracy. Public schools exercise state-based power over students' lives. Decisions about placement, discipline, tracking, and access to opportunity, and not neutral technical acts, but value judgments. And they determine who is encouraged, who is constrained, labeled, who things are promised to, or who is even treated as a risk. And because of these judgments that shape life trajectories, the authority to make that must be legitimate, accountable, and contestable. That is the standard that you should use to evaluate, I think, this conversation broadly. And my argument's very simple. AI systems cannot legitimately exercise decision-making authority over students because they are not accountable moral agents. And without external limits, these systems inevitably drift from advisory tools to de facto authorities. Even if the affirmative is correct in this case in Joshua, the AI can reduce things like human biases or increase consistency. That does not solve the core problem. Prediction's not judgment. Optimization is not moral reasoning, and accuracy does not confer legitimacy, right? So AI systems interpret students through narrow data models, test scores, attendance patterns, behavioral metrics, grading metrics, grading tendencies. They do not see students as whole persons embedded in families, communities, rights, or developmental contexts. They cannot weigh competing values. They cannot explain their decision in moral terms. They cannot be held responsible in any meaningful way. Their responsibility, as articulated in this conversation, inevitably goes back to the human. So it's the human that takes precedent over here. It is the human that is accountable. It is the human that is going to be the person that's going to be responsible, not the AI. So when an AI system makes a recommendation that becomes institutional practice, accountability becomes diffuse. Responsibility is hidden behind technical processes, vendor contracts, statistical claims, and over time, recommendation hardens into defaults, like I mentioned earlier. This is why we need externally defined limits. When a human educator makes a mistake, that decision can be questioned, it can be appealed, it can be corrected. The decision maker can be asked to justify their reasoning to parents, administrators, or the public. And that is what accountability looks like. A thing that's really important here that SteamRift mentioned in his opening was that and I'll say this verbatim because I wrote it down, they already function under dense accountability structures. So that phrase to me admits that external limits work and that external limits are essentially necessary, especially because they weren't really substantially contested in his opening, or even the flow of conversation. So just that statement alone for me comes off that he's closer to where I'm at rather than the actual position that he was holding. Now, I think that's incredibly important because yes, AI is an inevitable thing in schools and it's something that we ought to pay attention to, but we should be very, very mindful about AI being a tool and not becoming sort of the de facto authorities that I'm concerned about in my closing, my opening, and the course of the conversation. With that, I yield my time.
Okay, 30 seconds left. Okay, streamer, please go ahead.
So the topic today hinged on whether those limits should be external. I don't think Joe's made any comments about the risks that are particularly foolhardy. We certainly need these to be mindful, but that's autonomous at the individual school level, should not be thrust upon them externally, particularly because they have the, as I laid out, the 23 points. One, they have the responsibility and the accountability to oversee the education of these students. So they need to be empowered to do their job, not have external limitations that prevent them from being able to do it. Second, decentralized experimentation is how we learn best, by having schools at the individual level experiment with their own policies. This is how we've learned. And frankly, it's how we've learned across all sorts of educational management areas, such as, I mean, something as basic as how do we manage food? There's no external requirement on districts that they all have to comply with the same food policy. And while maybe school districts do have their own internal perspectives at the school level, there are any number of decisions that are made already, and we don't need to increase the bureaucracy of the already growing administrative state within schools by saying now they should be in charge of setting policy that prevents schools from being able to make good on what they've been empowered to do. And so when we're and then lastly, when you centralize rules, you centralize a problem. So I'm, again, a systems engineer. If we set one policy for all schools and then it's a bad policy, we've screwed all schools. And worse of all, is my point one, we've forced them into making bad decisions that they bear the responsibility, they bear the brunt of. And so I don't think that Joe made a very conclusive case here for why we should have external limits. And I am going to close on a few points. One, I want to thank Joe for setting this up, for the invitation. I think this was a very gentlemanly debate. I've enjoyed preparing for it. I want to thank Prime for hosting it here. Now, I do have one closing request for Prime, and this is super important. I don't care what I care what the answer is. There's no wrong answer, but there's going to be any number of people that are going to be wondering, who won, Prime? Who won? And since this is a structured debate, you're the only person that can tell us who was the most convincing. So, Joe, who made the most convincing point regarding external limits on the use of AI in education?
You mean Prime?
I mean Prime. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Black people look the same. I get it now.
Bro, thanks for admitting it.
It's true. Yeah,
I get it. No, I was looking at Joe, and
yeah, no, it's no worries.
We just met. Okay.
Yeah. So, I gotta say that I feel like Joe made the better argument from my perspective. But to be clear, right? Like I think I was already leaning to his side. I should say maybe you didn't make an argument to take me to your side, right? Let's leave Joe out of a second. Yeah. Well,
it is a competitive debate. It's fine. At the end of the game, we know who won. There's going to be if I lost, I lost. You're the arbiter. I agree that at the end of the go ahead.
Yeah. I don't want to say it's a loss necessarily. It's just I'll just say that like I wasn't necessarily convinced. What Joe was talking about in terms of like how does an individual like meaningful consent to these systems, right? Like if I'm a parent who knows nothing about any of these things, right? But like now I'm told my child is going to be put through an experiment, right? And yes, experiments happen within education all the time. In fact, when I was in elementary school, I was part of this like experiment thing. They would have teachers come in and evaluate what we were doing. There was just like a way of interacting with other students that they were testing out, right? And it seemed to work out well. But what was happening there was not a black box. Like within AI systems, there's a black box that just cannot be interrogated directly by.
It's not true.
Okay. So, well, maybe I'm incorrect. Okay, and so I love for you to educate me on this. I mean, if we're moving past like the actual debate portion here,
yeah,
right?
I lost. I get it. Thank you for giving a clear. By the way, thank you for giving a very clear verdict. Yeah, I mean the thing is, it sounds like although I'm gonna wrap up on the verdict. I believe you've already rendered it. The point that Joe and I were arguing on was if those limits should be external to the school, or if the school themselves should be choosing it. That was the question.
but
But yeah, getting
it's
past that,
still
AI
so. I
isn't a black
still
box. Yeah, go ahead.
like okay. So again, we see, and again, maybe it's because I have a fundamental misunderstanding, and that could be the case. And so I'll put this out there, right? But we see with AI systems that the public has access to, that you can put in the same prompt and get different responses. We see that sometimes these machines make mistakes, right? Especially when it comes to like math in particular. Math has been a big issue, right? So, like, you're telling me that these things are all like uh, 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 we can see it within this black box, but like from everything I've seen in terms of articles, that's actually not the case. That like so much of this is like a mystery. We put in the training data, right, and we can make some inferences as to what's going on, but like there's still the processes of coming to that conclusion are largely like outside of our view. Am I incorrect?
Um, so as is frequently the case, the devil's in the details. So the term in AI a lot that we're using is visibility. So do you have visibility into what's going on, right? Black box, it happens. So if you think about a black box, you put an input in and you get something out. If you feed that directly to the user, then there's no visibility on it. All of it's in the black box. The way most folks that are sensible are building systems now are they're taking that output, putting it somewhere else and measuring it, and also logging what's happening as it's happening so you can understand the shape of it. So for example, let us imagine, if you will, actually me, I'm assuming you played mini golf before.
Yes.
All right. Have you been to that hole where you've got three holes you can put the golf ball in and you don't know which one it comes out?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing. So when you're working with these models, yes, you can give it the same input and get a different output twice, but where you start to actually be able to predictably understand how it's going to behave is when you throw the ball down the hole and it comes out the one spot. You do it enough times, you gain confidence, and a lot of times it's not certainty, it's confidence. And you can do, for example, I recently built an AI powered prenup tool. And when we generate the documents, we actually do 4 passes on it to do sanity checks on things, to check for different just coherence, and then also cleaning it up. So it's not just we put in this and then we say, well, whatever, we put it in the oven, hit start, and whatever comes out comes out. It's using it as a piece of a workflow as opposed to the finished product. I don't know if that adds more clarity or not, but that hopefully that helps.
Well, that is helpful from a technical perspective. And Joe, if you want to jump in, I don't let me stop you. So that is quite helpful. I've heard of like sanity checks, but no one has ever like laid it out for me in the way you have. So thank you for that. In terms of a parent, though, right? I think something Joe also said was compelling is that like, hey, like how do I interrogate the decisions here, right? So yes, you can do these sanity checks, and yes, from a technical perspective, but like, will the AI system like explain its reasoning, and will that be the reasoning, right? And then should the and even if let's say it actually could like almost AGI level, right? It actively could explain its reasoning. Should we as a community even respect it?
So I'll answer on 2 threads. On thread 1, in my day-to-day using ChatGPT, Grok, whatever, I think of it as a highly intelligent peer that can make mistakes.
Mm.
When Now let's separate AI from language models. So language models, for those that don't know, even the people working on them were surprised when this started working. This we thought was 15, 20 years down the road or more, or it might not ever even work. So originally it was just how do we have this interface with human language and robots? Just think about it like a mouse and a keyboard, except for we can use our words. Except for now we've gone so far beyond the pale with that one. It can do complex thinking, it can evaluate morality, it can do all these things. Where I spend most of my time working and where most advanced, I believe all advanced AI projects are, is it's a workflow. So for example, let's imagine a grading system. Let's say I'm an English teacher and I'm teaching 8th grade English, and I want everyone to write an article about Rosa Parks, Susan B. Anthony, whoever it is, whatever. Um, we could feed all of the essays into this, And then what you do is you think about it like you're talking to a human and you're saying, I have this task and here's the parameter. So I have these essays and here's the rubric. We're scoring them on word length, on punctuation, on whatever this is. And also, while you're looking at it, give me a notion of the tone. Are my students happy, sad, this, that, whatever? You could actually infer an enormous amount of information off of that. So now the teacher is able to grade all of those essays, not just grade them all, but be able to provide qualitative reasoning behind the grading, provide a rubric behind it. You could say, so for example, I could build a system that would say, okay, I'm going to give you essays. And when you give me a grade, I want you to give me an explanation of the grade. I want you to give me 3 things they did well, 2 things they could improve on, and 1 insight that I, as a teacher, might not have otherwise picked up on. And then it can process all of that. And then the teacher says, okay, I've looked at the AI says this. Okay, I agree with this grade, don't agree with that grade. So it can also be a hybrid where it's helping and it's not making that final decision. But you're mirroring traditional computers with language models, and that's where like the really cool shit's happening right now, in my opinion.
And I think that's interesting from a technical perspective, but I guess my question was from a societal perspective, right? Like, especially the second one, like, why should we respect this ruling? Right, like okay, so if Joe's a teacher, and like well, he's competing against this AI, right? And we give him 10 different essays, right? And then Joe arrives at a completely different conclusion. What Joe, like when assigning this assignment, right? He's looking for a very specific approach that students need to take, right? And the AI says, hey, this is fine, but it's not actually capturing what Joe's intent was. And so when Joe, like, independently grades these, he arrives at a different conclusion, which should we respect, right? The AI was properly, as you know, as well as possible, set. The parameters are set. But Joe, the teacher, arrived at a different conclusion. Which of these should we respect?
Well, I'm going to challenge the premise, but I'm going to answer the question first. The answer to the question is I would trust the teacher to set the rubric. The engineer in me says, I don't know how the machine could screw it up, because if, for example, Joe laid out and could articulate what the standard was, that language models are generally like outstanding at this. So I would suspect in that example, what we'd find is Joe would probably find consistently. So there's a human feedback loop from Joe on it too, in that example. So let's say we say, okay, we gave it 1 essay and here's 1 response in the grades. And he goes, it's not quite right. Well, we'd want to change what we're asking it to score. So think about the AI like a teaching assistant, where you say, teaching assistant, here's the rubric for just this assignment. You don't know everything about just this assignment. And here's the standard, and come up with that. So I guess in that example, what we'd want something where Joe's used it consistently and feels like it's accurately doing its job. Like, I use this in programming and in writing an enormous amount. It's outstanding with programming, unsurprisingly, because it's code. But part of my trust in these systems is because, like, I've used them and they've been bad. Like, I started using them a few years ago and like they're friggin' room for improvement. But my trust in them is built based off of, like, I've shipped projects with them. Like, I've used them a lot and they've built a track record with me. And I think that's largely where we're at with most AI application, is it's building that trust record of trust, also having it be in a good use case. And I think education's good use case, but so now we're working on that trust.
That was something that was in my it didn't come up throughout the course of the conversation, but the question is, or I guess like a part of something that I'm hearing that Prime is saying, is that if I have a student that's been struggling specifically on whatever this prompt is, how can the AI meaningfully interpret that child, even though this grade might be failing, is demonstrating progress? How can you input that?
Oh, that's an awesome question. So one of the things so there's this concept called lateral thinking. It's like, and we usually with comparisons a lot, right? Think about this and now apply it to that. Okay, lateral thinking. What you could do, for example, let's say I built a system and it was for an English class and we're grading essays. We wanted to measure improvement. We could, when we're running it, you can feed the model all of the prior assignments and say, now weight this with a trajectory. We're doing better, we're doing worse. And the other thing is, from the perspective of a parent, there's a lot that humans give off the way that they write, and we can spot a lot about like emotional distress and a whole wide variety of other things using these systems in a frictionless way to not merely like notice when stresses are happening with children, but use it as a way of understanding at like a greater level, like where the mood of the room is. So maybe, you know, a lot of the students are distressed, and maybe that gives the principal insight to make decisions about recreation or any number of other things. But it opens the door to actually really bringing in a lot more information about students that can be used for identifying outliers, for spotting folks that are doing well, for acknowledging when folks are trending up, even if they got a C, they had an F last time, that kind of stuff.
Right, but that sounds like it's presupposing progress. Like a student could get, let's say they have 10
That was the example
assignments.
you gave me, Joe. Bro,
Right, no,
don't set
but
me up for fail like that. I answered your question.
It's sort of. If a student gets 9 out of 10 Fs and gets 1 A on the last assignment, how does, and I as the teacher call that them getting it? Like I see that definitively, even though it's still relatively subjective, that hey, it shows that hey, all these different connections, even though that he was failing, we were seeing 17 out of 100, 37 out of 100, 27, 10, and different spikes, and then all of a sudden there's a huge spike upward. Now, and if I present to my authorities, the people higher up to me, that this student is deserving to pass because of this final grade, how can the AI account for that argumentation? How does it rationalize that?
So you're presupposing that it would, and I'll give you a plausible scenario where it could draw insights. What's that?
Can an AI account for that?
Yeah,
to make
so
the argumentation that the student ought to go through to the next grade because of this singular letter grade against the entire school year where they were failing the entire school year.
So the way that if I were to build a system to do this, here's how it would arrive at that. Here's the only way I could see it arriving at that conclusion, at least as of the way I'm thinking on it now, which is just now. Let's say that there were 10 tests and each one was in a different area, but the last test was the cumulative on everything. So we see frequently students don't always participate uniformly on all their projects, but on each of the tests where they got a low score, let's say these are written questions just to make it a little cleaner. If they understood the basic concepts of pieces of it along the way, but in that final assignment, they were able to demonstrate competence across all of them or enough to pass, like the model would be able to aggregate whether or not they've demonstrated competence across like all of the niches. And so there's limits on context windows. So I'm sort of painting with a little bit of a broad brush here. We're talking about differences of API fees, not capability. But that's how it could come to that. But I would think it's strange. I think it would be strange to say there's one grade that all of a sudden now we're going to turn the ship on it. But that's how it could come to that conclusion.
Well, I mean, that's a common thing that happens in education. Like there's common moments where a student might not get something, and it's just failing. And then all of a sudden, just the pieces come together during the last couple of months and their success, or the pieces come together during the final exam. And sometimes, and again, like it will be a subject call. Like one teacher might argue they clearly cheated. Another teacher might argue, well, they clearly connected the dots. Here are all the small, subtle markers that show retention based on engaging with that student across the entire school year. And that was like the point I was trying to make in the debate proper, where AI is context specific and you're going to have to feed. It's only as good as it's the mode of how it's process, like the processing modes, like the mode of analysis essentially, and its relationship between the current knowledge and then the object itself, this object being the student. If all we know in input that this student is a failure and then all of a sudden they start passing, there's no way to discern. You have to be very, very overly specific about why all of a sudden that they're passing, and an AI can't explain that.
Sure,
a teacher can.
A poorly designed AI cannot. I'll give you that one.
Right, but
a well-designed AI could go across more subject matter experts than For example, you got an English teacher, you got a math teacher, you got a psychology teacher, you got a biology teacher.
Okay.
AI could ingest all of those assignments and score them across the volley. In addition to that, indicate if, well, look, back in October, Tom, Susie, whoever was having a hard time, and you could tell in the writing, the verbs they're using, whatever, like they're just emotionally bogged down. Maybe had personal, like you care about marginalized communities. One of the things that's really interesting about AI is a secondary benefit that it's incredible at is literally understanding the psycho emotional state of an individual off of just a writing sample. So this
And
gives the ability to do a complete holistic review of the student at deep level across specialties that teachers can't. But
and how can the AI rationalize that that's correct?
it can support its work. Like,
How?
for example, you can tell it to explain its logic, and you can even give it a value system to explain the logic under. For example, you could say, let me finish. You can say, I'm at a Title IX school, and I'm trying to make sure that my students are doing great, or Title I, I forget the term, but I'm at a school that needs more attention, and I want to take a holistic view of my students, and I want them to have grades great on that personal life curve. You could actually feed it all of the English assignments, for example, and it could explain to you why it weighed different things. For example, if there's a particular typo that certain minorities, for example, we'll pick on Spanish speakers for a moment. Let's say Spanish speakers inherently have some thing in their English written assignments that they naturally do wrong. The AI could offset that one little piece on that assignment just for that student and say, and here's why I'm weighing it at this 1%, 10%, 100%, whatever the hell it is. Teachers would die of exhaustion before they would be able to go through the amount of readings that AI can go through.
Sure, but then who, again, we can build all of these things within an AI, but it still doesn't get to the crux of it, where at the end of the day, we are used to and socialized to come to humans for these accountability measures, humans when it comes to these forms of feedback. And now we're saying that we ought to offshoot these and outsource it to an artificial intelligence. And the only way that we can make sure that they're correct is that the developers inputted the right data so that it can explain how it's correct.
No, so think about
how the problem might arise there.
So think about it like this: we've got one computer, and we feed it info, and it brings it back to us. Mm-hmm. That's just call that the processing, like the language model. We'll just call it that. That's the API. Okay, fine. Separate from that, we're tracking what assignments are being submitted to the system. We're tracking the rubric for that, and we're asking the language model to show its work and explain it. So this way, there's one, transparency, and two, auditability. Because the other thing is, let's say we got it all wrong. Let's say the assignment, we gave the wrong rubric, a bunch of students got the wrong grades. With AI, going through and redoing the grading would be fairly easy. Go through and go, okay, now do it off of this. So we have the ability to reach back and redo things at scale and quickly, which is a radical improvement. So like, we should be like, these are all, I think these are good points. Like, I think it's important to ask AI to show its work. That's what a lot of engineers are doing these days.
Can I ask you both a question?
No, you're the moderator.
I do have a question though, Prime, that's tied to this. It's kind of important. You might be we might be on the same line of thought here. Should the AI also have all of the medical, social, economic, and political information of the student as it's coming to its inclusion, its decision making?
No.
Are those relevant data points? Why?
I would say the assignment, the rubric, and then the prior assignments would be sort of a foundational level. All of those other things, like if you wanted to account for it, like that'd be an interesting thing on like an individual test basis with the school, is add those as extra layers to look through. But AI lets you actually have that level of granularity at scale.
So AI
does that answer your question?
So AI can determine if my child has non-functioning, like non-verbal autism?
I don't understand the premise of your question.
If my child is non-verbal,
Yes.
Is that an important data metric that the AI should know?
I don't know. It might be irrelevant depending on the query.
Well, let's say the query requires it. Should it be included?
Yes, if it's required, it should be included.
And if a parent says no?
You're playing a weird game here, friend.
I'm asking.
If the parent says no, so if the system needs it and the parent says no, then the system can't be used.
Okay. So should parents be allowed to say no to the AI?
Baked into what I just answered, the answer is yes.
Got it. Because before in the argument, you said that parents consent by virtue of the school board.
So I have a question for you. Right now, are we having a sort of post-debate conversation, or are we still going at it?
Well, no, it's a post-debate conversation, but it's just a commentary that you mentioned in the debate proper. You made the argument of the idea of essentially parents consent by virtue of the voting of the school board member.
Right.
But
so do you want to
Yes, here's something a little bit different. So I'm just trying to figure out exactly like where you stand on that. Obviously, positions are positions and the confines of debate, but
do you want to debate the nature of things as they are, or what my opinion on what they should be is? Because those are not the same.
I'm just trying to see where your head's at.
As it sits right now, parents, by virtue of enrolling their students in schools, agree to X. Now, X is a term that's been gone as far as to putting what some parents would view as pornographic books in schools, and some are very much against that. And unfortunately, nature of the public system the way that it is, we're trying to set a public policy for those. So I'd lean towards parent choice super heavily.
Well, to be clear,
if I may finish,
material is disallowed. So let's make sure we're like,
that's obviously not true.
That's
because there is pornographic material that's been in schools, and we're playing funny word games to say things like very explicit language and vulgar pictures are all of the sudden not porn if we want to put it in a school.
No, because
goofy position to hold.
No, because when you're dealing,
go ahead.
Because we're talking about external limits, right?
Are we in debate pro mode?
No, I'm saying that we were talking about external limits and how things are kind of regulated. The librarian has the final say about what books are in and inside of a library. And definitionally, as a matter of morals and ethics, a librarian would never allow definitionally pornographic material to be in a public school. Are there potentially pieces of vulgar content that might make its way through different texts? This is absolutely obvious. There are so many examples of this, from Shakespeare all the way to Richard Wright. However, that doesn't make it pornographic. Richard Wright raping
you have a really friggin' awful logic claim. Your claim is that a librarian would never put pornographic material in a library as if it's an immutable truth.
It's explicitly disallowed.
If I may fucking finish, as if it's explicitly, as a function of mechanics, impossible for a librarian to bring some content to a library without, it's like as if there's some force field around it that would prevent it from happening, which just isn't the case. It's a human. Yes. Humans can make decisions, and they have put, by the definitions I would use, pornography in schools. So and I'm using that, if I may, I'm illustrating that. I'm using it to illustrate the point that in pursuit of policies that match for a whole school district, there's friction on that. And so that's an issue that's the nature of public schools, unfortunately.
Right.
Prime had a question, but
yeah, I don't want to hop off this real quick. Just
can we come back to it? Okay.
I can wait. I can wait if you guys.
Yeah. All right, Joe. Let's do it. Yeah.
Definitionally, for librarians,
depiction of erotic behavior. Is that agreed?
Wrong.
Oh, Merriam-Webster, you disagree with? All right.
Because the definition.
Why believe anything then?
Sorry, no. So librarians don't function under dictionaries for how to define the material in their schools or in their libraries. Excuse me. So pornography, in the confines of how librarians interpret it, and this is consistent because they have a code of ethics that applies to all librarians. It's sexually explicit material such as films, images, writing, intended for the explicit use of sexual arousal. And it is the explicit use that's important here. A book can have sexually suggested material but that doesn't necessarily mean that that material in the book writ at large is explicitly for sexual arousal. So you could
So
have a scene of sexual violence in a book that does not make the book pornography. You can
wasn't the
have
argument I
a,
made. Wasn't
I'm
the
just
argument I made.
I'm making sure that that is 1,000% clear, because you said the examples of the books that were being
There's
targeted,
the
which
bad
we,
list, and we know there's a freaking
yes,
someone talking about a cock being in their mouth. A freaking
and is
seventh grader has no need for that in public
so
education.
the
And you have to
question.
abandon, Joe, you have to abandon Merriam-Webster dictionaries to make your strained argument. You have to abandon the dictionary.
No, because, like I said,
The depiction of erotic behavior, as in pictures, movies, intended to cause sexual excitement. That's not the
there it
definition
is,
you gave.
intended to cause sexual. The like it's the entire book. The entire book has to be that thing in order for that
No,
thing
it
to
can
be
have some
categorically
pornographic pages.
pornographic. So if a book
Bro,
has, let me make
bro.
sure I'm understanding what you're saying here. If a book has a sex scene for 3 pages, is that book pornography?
It has a pornographic section. Therefore, a part of it's pornographic and has no place in a school. And I'm excluding colleges. I'm
you're
talking about
you're inserting a thing. You inserted a thing.
you
Ren.
abandoned the dictionary.
You said those 3 pages was a section of pornography. I am asking if the book writ large is pornography. And it sounds like you're saying no.
You're playing some strange gymnastics here. I'm going to answer it directly because I don't mind answering it. The book itself would not be categorized that way. I will tell you, there's a lot of
Fantastic.
Christians, not the least. So I was a devout Mormon until almost 30. I would find any film that had a sex scene in it vulgar and I wouldn't watch it. Whether it's 1 page, 5 pages, or the whole thing. It's
But just
now, and I'm
because
not
it's vulgar doesn't make
let me
pornography.
fucking finish.
All right.
That's just one person's perspective. There is no need for pornographic material in elementary or high school education. There's no need for it. It's salacious and unnecessary.
So any piece of text that has any type of sexual activity ought to be.
He jumped up. I think he did that by accident. I think
Oh.
he was trying to take down the thing. So let's see if he
Oh,
comes
yeah.
back. Yeah, I don't think he.
But
did it on
what thing?
purpose.
I don't know. I was.
He shared the screen. I think he was trying to unshare.
Oh,
There he
gotcha,
is.
gotcha.
He's back. He's back. Yeah,
Meant to stop sharing the screen instead of stop sharing.
exactly what I thought. Yeah, no worries, friend. Go ahead. Go ahead, Joe. You were gonna
Yeah, so
respond.
I'm just trying to understand. I'm just trying to understand because this is a position I've never heard before. So it's kind of interesting to me. If any text that has sexual material in it is vulgar, is that your position?
No, I really feel like you're. So I try to give you some broad, clear, easy to follow definitions, and then you want to go to strange edge case to try to twist it. That's what it seems like.
No, I'm just trying to understand. Like,
so I'll give it to you very clear. I'll be super fucking clear. Are you ready for that? So let's say there's a 100-page book and there's 3-page sex scene.
Yes.
Take the 3-page sex scene out. I'm fine with the book in a public school with minor children. I'm assuming there's nothing else about it. Now, I don't care if it's only 3 pages or the whole book. I don't want any depiction of erotic behavior or depiction of acts in a sensational manner so as to arouse quick, intense emotional reaction. I don't want that with kids. I don't think it's appropriate. I think it's immoral. I think it's a crazy hill to die on.
But wouldn't the arousal in the context of how it's presented be subjective?
No.
Really? So people got aroused when reading.
So
Black
now you're
Boy?
just wandering. Now you're wandering.
No,
Now
I'm trying to understand how far this
depiction
goes.
of erotic behavior. Is that so? Okay.
So hold on. Okay, let me add this here. Okay.
Mm.
So I've had this conversation that you guys are having quite a few times.
Yes.
It's been quite intense. And so me being a lefty, right? My position, you can predict what that might be. However, what our friend StreamRift has been saying just now, actually something clicked within me, right? Combining both of your opinions, right? So Joe says, and I think accurately, librarians do an evaluation of these books. I don't know how thorough that evaluation is. I mean, they get a lot of books. So I don't know how thorough that is, but still, right? They do some sort of evaluation of these books, and things that like the majority of the country would consider pornographic are excluded, right? However, going to what Streamer said, he's like, well, from his Christian perspective, having a portion of the book, right, being a sex scene, right, explicit sex scene, even a small portion, right, is too much. And he talked about how like there's just a portion of population, and we know this to be true, right? A portion of population who very much agrees with them, right?
Yeah.
It seems like even though I don't agree with it, it seems it would be wrong to like say that is invalidated, that their feelings aren't something worth considering, right? And in this case, like I think the two options, either like flag certain books that have some level of vulgarity, right, and say like if these come up, let all parents know, do a blast out, send out notices to all parents and make sure they get explicit consent to involve their children in that, right? And maybe separate the kids out who don't get that permission or something like that, right? Or honestly, go to a Christian type school that like where your values align. The thing I'm against is necessarily like banning books just for vulgarity, but the point that I want to get across is that I think what Streamwith is saying is valid. Like his concerns
Absolutely.
can be valid, and the concerns of his community.
Right. And
So
the
Joe, I got to ask
thing-
you this though.
Yeah.
Just 2 point one. The fact that this gets sold as a book ban when it's just literally like don't put it in front of kids is bad faith in general, and that's not on anyone on this call. But it gets framed as, oh well, conservatives want to ban books. No, I don't fucking care. Go read whatever filthy, disgusting, nasty thing that excites you, and God bless America. It's your right. I don't think it belongs in public schools. So to
Which
that
would
point too, why
be a
the
book ban.
fuck, Joe, do you in schools, but a book ban is typically viewed as Fahrenheit 451. It's a false conflation. That's the dishonesty in it. So if we're gonna be honest, it's not saying ban the book everywhere. It's saying ban it from children. That's what it's saying.
It's
So
saying ban
Joe,
it in schools,
why is it
not from children? But yeah, I understand what you're saying.
why is it you think that it is important for this material that is sexual in nature to be in public schools? Because it seems like that's a position you're holding.
No, I'm saying that every work needs to be viewed in the context that it occurs. We can agree that there are sort of
So should there be books where there are teenagers talking about giving oral sex to each other and how strange and exciting it is? Should that be a part of the public education experience?
It depends on the context of how it presents itself.
What context could it possibly be okay in?
Let's say you have a character and you're trying to build I'm making a really I'm not a writer, so give me some grace here. Let's say you're trying to articulate and contextualize how certain conversations that you might feel comfortable with some of your friends might not be comfortable in the broader context. So let's say in this book, the teacher goes around and talks about, hey, what did you do this weekend that you had fun? And then this child, unprovoked, starts talking about these acts that you were mentioning that you find vulgar and explicit. In that sort of context, I would not consider that content designed to try to arouse the audience. I would say it would be in a context of trying to send a signal that this is not normal based on what other students may have said prior in that book. Does that make sense?
So what you didn't answer is why it's important for that to be a part of a public education curriculum.
I don't.
That was my question.
I don't think.
Can I try to answer that? can I try to answer that, StreamRift?
Yeah, please.
So uh, and again, what I'm about to say, I want to be clear. It doesn't invalidate your feelings, right? Like,
Yeah.
because I think what your position is interesting, and I think it's worth discussing. But like the reason why I think that would be valid is because like, and I believe the book you're referring to, this was a gay encounter, right? It was like yeah, a boy and putting another boy's penis in his mouth. Um, I think that's valid because kids go through these things. They go through
I
these
st-
things. They use that. Well, let me finish. Yeah. So they
mhm.
use, and I mean, I not sexually. I didn't have any sexual encounters as a child. I can tell you that. But I can say that my experience with fiction has helped me so much. Right, I think fiction is amazing because it's helped me so much put context to my experiences and like figure out the type of person I want to be. Me, I'm actually I consider myself quite a loyal person, and I decided on loyalty being a thing, a core value of mine through fiction that helped me get perspective within my life and what was important to me, right? And so like having that, like especially like a child going through the world, and yes, we can both agree that children shouldn't be having sexual experiences. We'll stipulate that, but they do, right? And I think it's worth it to like prepare kids for the world. I think that's like the heart of education, and some of that involves these uncomfortable things. So there's that example which with the sex, but like just shifting a little bit, right? Let's say it wasn't sex. Instead, it was talking about like physical abuse by a parent,
Color Purple
right?
is a good example.
Yeah, yeah. So like we can all agree here, right? Children should not be physically abused, but children
Yes.
are physically abused, right?
And they don't have
And
the language to understand how to get help and that it's wrong, and
exactly,
having books frames all
exactly,
this. I agree. So I just want to go back
yeah.
real quick. From a sex edge perspective, I see the argument of the sexual content. The problem is that this got shoved into fucking elementary schools. That's why conservatives are so bothered by this. And at school board meetings, parents, to prove the point, are going to public meetings reading the books themselves that are on the shelves in the school, and the mic is getting shut off, and they're being asked out, and they're being told they can't literally read the book that's in the school. And so
Because
I
of
think
that's
Joe, I try to listen to you. So the problem here is, I think where there's an ideological difference is, I do not view children as the property of the state. It is not the responsibility of the state to address all of these areas for children. The reason why they go to public school is for public education. And I'm a fan of nutrition programs. I don't want to get too derailed with that. But the fundamental difference of opinion, I believe, is parents are responsible for helping their children navigate that. And when the school starts supplanting ideologies that are incompatible with what the children are being raised by their parents to view and understand, that is a moral offense, and it's a breach of the contract. Go ahead.
there's a lot there, but the biggest thing is the reason why they get stopped has nothing to do with the actual content of the book itself. It has to do with the rules of
How do
decorum
you know
as it
that?
because I'm not going to reveal my shit online, but
All right, yeah, don't do that. I do reveal mine, but yeah.
to make it very simple, school boards have rules around decorum, and you need to present whatever you would like to the school board in the context of the purview of the conversation or whatever's on the actual lead sheet for that school board meeting. So if you have a problem with something that's in a book, it is not your right to go to a school board and go and speak off parts of that book that you're against if that book is not on the official minutes of what's being discussed. Open discussion is an open discussion on whatever you would like. It's in the confines in
Yes,
most
it is.
cases it's
It's public
not.
criticism. When they have open public criticism sections, and you go in and you pull out a book that's in the library at that school and you say, I don't think this should be here. Let me explain why. That's exactly why it's there. And even if, let's assume for a moment, Joe, I agree with you completely 100% that you, in whatever context, that was the rule. I'm talking about multiple school districts where this has happened, and those aren't the rules they're playing by. So independent of your personal experience, this is a thing that's been playing out in school after school. And I don't even know why it's so controversial. Why is it so offensive that conservatives, Christians, whoever want to say, I would like sexually explicit material outside of elementary schools? And we already have a framework for this with sex ed. Generally, there's many states that require parental permission for sex ed. And this lets the parents play a role with that process. There's no reason under the sun why sexually explicit material, if we're going to put it somewhere, that's the place to put it.
Again, like these books when they do anything, and Prime can talk about this a bit too, maybe, they're used in the context of the book, and sometimes they're used in discussion to reinforce things that are already being discussed. So like if you're having conversations about consent and you're reading The Color Purple, it is very, very clear that there are very few consensual relationships in that entire book. And in fact, like I vividly remember when I was reading that book, having the very question of like, hey, is this relationship consensual? Is this like okay? Is this something that we ought to allow? Like The Color Purple was a jump off to talk about frameworks of consent, frameworks of legitimate relationship, and frameworks of what's considered right and wrong. And a lot of books do this in different examples. This Color Purple is just the first one that came to my head.
Well, the problem with that the argument is no one gave a shit particularly about The Color Purple. I'm talking about when
Absolutely
they're literally saying, suck my dick.
It was a banned book for years. Like,
all right. So do you want to talk about the sexualized material that is being protested in schools, or are we talking about this? So like you're to my mind, and since Prime has spent as much time as it sounds like he spent on this, maybe he already sees where these are going. And frankly, it's a topic I don't think there's anything really to talk about. I think it's filth and it shouldn't be in front of kids, and anybody defending it is defending the indefensible. There's no reason to expose children to this without parental consent. None.
The compromise is this of like,
I don't do compromises on morals.
You do.
Don't do it.
You do, but that's okay. So like if there's something that a minority community, which is the Mormon community, believes not to be correct, and they're trying to engage in the broader public, i.e. the public school system in the United States of America, there are certain concessions that they're going to have to do with the things that they believe to engage with the broader public. So you're going to have to make concessions on your morals. You're going to have to make concessions on your ethics. Now, does that mean you abandon them? No, they need to be presented responsibly in context. So that's why you have things like consent forms. You make very explicitly clear that the book that we are covering or the piece of content that we're doing contains X, Y, and Z. In a lot of cases, some do it better than others. There's examples of the actual material that exists within that. And then that gives the parent the opportunity to opt in or out of that thing, especially if it's something quite severe. Like for instance, in The Color Purple, there's multiple sexual violence scenes. In Black Boy, there's an explicit sexual violence scene, and it's in the first like 20 pages. And like dude commits animal brutality, burns his house down, and assaults a woman. And it's in like the first 3 chapters. Why the fuck are we
exposing this to kids? It doesn't. So you're not answering why this has to be in front of kids. And
well,
the other
this is.
I don't
this
have
is an
to
autobiography.
My morals. I can stand on my position, and the whole world can move around me without me shifting my stance. My stance is and will remain: children should not be exposed to sexually explicit material at any percentage in public schools without parental consent. And at that point, I'm only talking within the context of sexual education. Largely, it's that simple. There's nothing more to really discuss on it. I hear you pivoting and squirming here, but like it's that simple. You're
consenting.
I'm not going to move.
I'm not trying to have you move. I'm just saying that the consent already exists. Now, the issue when it comes to books in school, like books in libraries, there's also a variable that exists there where there are
public libraries or school libraries.
Public and school libraries have multiple points of contact to make sure.
Why can't we bifurcate them?
One more time. That word's not in the Bible. Bifurcate.
No, I think you're right. It's not in the Bible. But let's separate those. Public libraries and school libraries.
To quote the Animaniacs, bifurcate What are you trying to say? Is what I'm trying to ask you.
I'm sorry. It means to separate the issues. So if I said you're dumb and ugly, we'd bifurcate dumb and say dumb and go over why you're dumb and bifurcate go ugly. By the way, I'm not meaning that as a passing attack at you. I think you've been very.
So you're just saying bifurcate means to divide.
Right. So to have
Gotcha.
public schools in one group and then have high school, so public libraries in one group and school libraries in another.
Sure.
So for example, if we could have never had this fight, most conservative Christians would get over the fact that at the public library, there's smut in the adult section or whatever, appropriately labeled and categorized. We'd get over that. What is impossible to get over is the insistence of the schools that this material needs to be available to children. That's insane. And that is where if we're going to say, let's not ban books, great. Let's not ban them at the public library. I'm anti-censorship more so than virtually anyone listening or anyone on the planet, to be honest. However, when we're talking about, I give my kids to the state temporarily, the state's entrusted with the care of my children to educate them. I don't want them exposed to sexually explicit material, particularly because there's nothing about that which is helping them learn math, science, history, build for a career, none of that.
So when a school library and a public library are functioning under the same institutional roof, what do you do then?
If it's serving school, as there's kids that are in, so we're assuming there's imagine there's a school and the school has a library.
Have to imagine it's there's multiple schools in Florida that do this already. Where
I'm trying to use a hypothetical. Sorry, why don't you paint the actual fucking example then instead of like I'm trying to paint one for you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, multiple schools across the country, thousands, hundreds of thousands, I would argue, have public libraries that also function as official school libraries. So they have both functions. So I'm asking you, what do you do then when you have buildings that have both functions for the public and for schools? What do you do then?
So I'm recalling from 25 years ago, the library in my hometown. And I believe the downstairs was a children's area and the upstairs was, call it the rest of the library. Mm-hmm. Have them completely separated and no sexually explicit material in the children's area. I don't know why this is a complicated thing. You seem like a smart man. This isn't even remotely challenging. Go ahead.
It doesn't exist though. That's the thing. Like the narrow,
then remove all of the smut that the children are exposed to. Then fine, make it a clean library.
There's still no smut. Like the thing is, what happens in practical.
Joe, is that can I be honest with you? I'm sick of talking about this. It's fucking stupid. I made my point. I get your point. You don't like my point. I'm not moving
I don't like
point.
your
Prime. Do you feel like I'm mischaracterizing this?
I mean, I think you made your position clear. And if you're getting tired of talking about it, we can move on and things here.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many more other interesting things to talk about.
Well, I'd like to say this, and you can respond or not respond. Okay, and again,
go for it.
Yeah. To be clear, I don't want to invalidate anything because
I appreciate and you've been a gentleman. Go ahead. Yeah, let's hear it.
Yeah. So something that Joe said really touched me. Now, actually, Joe's probably gonna roast me for this later on. Actually, I've never read The Color Purple. I've heard a lot about it.
Understandable. Most people see the musical first before the book, but yeah.
Yeah,
or know of the musical first. Yeah,
I know of it, and I haven't even watched that. So in any case, so I haven't seen it, right? But from his description of it, and it lines up with what I've heard previously. Yeah, it has some really rough, ugly scenes, and like you said, a SteamRift, that you feel like there's just no reason to have such material, right? Explicit material in front of children. And that, I can't align with. Now, I can agree that maybe it should not be in front of your children, SteamRift.
Could we look for middle ground here, if I can? Because I actually think the example so there are things that are of historical importance. For example, in Mormon history, there was in 1838, Governor Boggs of Missouri signed Executive Order 44. It was the Mormon Extermination Act. That's an ugly piece of American history, state-sanctioned religious genocide on American soil. I don't think we should hide from history because it's unpleasant. And I think that there's any number of unpleasant aspects of history. Even in the Book of Mormon itself, it discusses murder, rape, all these other terrible things. I'm not saying the topics are verboten. It's the particular books that are the hills that these librarians and whatnot are choosing to die on don't serve any particular value. Like I'm going to say, I'll revise. Like if we're talking about, so Joe, feel free to lecture me as being as pasty white as you'd like here. My understanding is that The Color Purple is somewhat of a historical account. Is that accurate?
No,
Okay, what is it?
it's a novel by Alice Walker.
It's
And-
a fictionalized. Yeah.
So it's fictionalized history, is that correct?
Yep.
So it tells a story of some things that happen in a way that helps convey history. There's
Not exactly, but sure.
Okay, I'll
Yeah.
I'll walk away from that then, and I'll go this far with it. I think there's text that has some ugly language in it and some upsetting things in it that is a part of us understanding our history, the nature of humans, things like that. And I think sometimes there's just recreational smut. And I think the failure, the refusal to acknowledge the difference, to bifurcate, to separate, to split them apart, right? It's just some of these books are just contemporary smut, and they might say, "Oh, well, it's gender theory, it's this, it's that, it's okay." That's all well and good, and I'm glad that people can write this and publish this and share this, and I'm sure in some contexts it's great. Just keep it the hell out of the schools. Now you might say, "Well, we can't talk about bad things in the schools." Well, look, there's some of it that might necessarily be there for some academic reason, but I'm gonna beat on Joe for this one. I've said explicitly, why do we need it? And I haven't heard why we need it. Like
So,
the argument is, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is where I was trying to touch
These
on
things
that,
happen.
like, yeah, well, yeah,
To
these
people,
things
yeah.
happen,
To
and like in
people.
terms of like describing like sexualized violence, because specifically the thing that you've been very clear, Streamer, that you have a problem with is sexualized imagery right in front of children. That's like the big thing.
And words, but yeah.
And sorry, and what? Sorry.
The word the words in itself. So it's whether it's depicted in words, filthy, smutty language versus there's pictures of it.
Imagery. Oh, sorry, fair enough.
Yeah,
sure.
it's a small thing, but yeah, good.
No, yeah, that's fair. Anyway, so you specifically like that is what you disagree with, right? Like I can think of so many reasons why that should be in front of children, especially what Joe just described, like with the Color Purple, because like he said, what that got him start thinking about is consent, right? There are so many children who aren't exposed to that and who don't think have these conversations about consent, right? That their parents like maybe do avoid the subject or do a very poor job, right?
Or
Talking
don't
about like
believe in it, and they're having those problems at their own home, and they're having a hard time understanding the
all of
world
that.
around them.
Yeah, and I think kids who aren't exposed to that type of discussion, that type of thought-provoking material, become adults who don't understand, who don't consider consent at all, and make horrible mistakes, even though they're actually good people, right? They're not some
Yeah, let me
sadists.
let me ask you this: do you think that, imagine you and I were setting the approved reading list,
Mhm.
and I said, I'm here and I'm going to provide the perspectives of conservative Christian. Now, just full disclosure, like I'm not against this for adults in the least. I live a pretty rowdy life, we could say. I don't
You
mind
live
it
in
for
Las
adults.
Vegas. Yeah, we get it.
I live
yeah.
in Las Vegas, and I wouldn't be happier anywhere else. I love it
Yeah.
here. It's perfect for me, and all that implies. So, reason I bring it. Let's say we came up with a list of 5 or 10 books, and I said, let's make a list of 5 or 10 books that have historical significance, that are explaining this, that whatever, that have some merit. There's a good argument for why this is on it. Do you think we could, if we could come up with 5 or 10 books, do you think we could cover all of the necessary smut that would need to be in the 4 corners of the school within 5 or 10 books that are they're carefully selected to help paint these pictures? And then once you answer, same question to Joe.
5 or 10 books. Probably
So
not.
color purple one. I mean, right? Is it 100? Is it 1,000? Is it next time they come
Well,
up with
I
some?
mean, like, how do we like narrow down all of the varied experiences of humans, right? Like, how do we like narrow the human experience down? So, like,
Well, no, what I mean by that
it's
is it's a
yeah,
representative
sure,
sample, right? Like, so
sure,
for example, I learned about different religions growing up, and I'm glad that I did. I think it's important to live in a society where we
uh-huh.
understand each other. So I'm not offended at, for example, learning about the Quran or anything else. I am offended at the idea of some ideas that are controversial, that are whatever. Like, it's not even just that they're controversial; it's that they're offensive to the moral fabric of my culture. And
Hmm.
so, if I'm saying my children are going to be exposed to this so they can understand the world around them, that's a sell. That's a point. If I'm being
Hmm.
told that my kids are going to be able to have unrestricted access to filth unknown, and their peers are going to have it, and I don't have it, that's a different pitch. Does
Well,
that
hold
help
on.
clarify where I'm trying to find common
Yeah,
ground?
but like, let's check in with Joe here because maybe I'm misunderstanding. Maybe he didn't answer this directly, right? So, like I said at the start, I think what you're saying in terms of like parental consent is valid. That parents should be informed. Like this is clearly an objectionable material, quote unquote, right? Objectionable material, right? Some people object. You are one of them, right? So wouldn't it be reasonable to give you the chance to consent, right? We talked about like consent previously in terms of the AI, right? Consenting to those systems. So,
We're talking
Joe,
about consent alone.
yeah, exactly. So, Joe, right? Should he have the opportunity as a parent, right, to be able to explicitly consent to, reading materials that could be objectionable to his children?
Without question, absolutely.
Okay, well, great. It seems like we're on the same page. As long as our friend StreamRift here can agree that, like, since he has the ability to consent, that these books can also be within the school, right? Maybe they can be cordoned off, right? Maybe like like they're in a special section of the library. You have to get permission or whatever to interact
Right.
with
They're
it.
behind the desk or whatever. So here's the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, at the beginning of the year, maybe they say, here's some books that we want your children to learn about. Please
Hmm.
send this consent back so that way we can talk about it in class. That's completely transparent. It gives an opt out, and it doesn't create what's the real problem. Part of the real problem here is it's like this giant lack of transparency, and if you have no idea what's going on, other than folks other than you are putting ideas into your kid's head, and you don't know what it is. So if we're good with some approved list ahead of time, and we're having parental consent, I I think that allows for the redeeming values of it and doesn't unnecessarily thrust ideologies on young minds as they're developing that may be at odds with what their family's values are.
Yeah, it's speaking to two things, right? Or a few things rather. When I go to a library and maybe there's a graphic novel, like let's say there's a lot of different, like let's say I don't know if Prime's been reading this or been up to it. The new Dark DC is pretty rough in terms of their
I literally been reading
or
the
absolute.
Absolute Universe. It's
Yeah.
amazing. It's
Yeah, it's
amazing. Yeah.
it's really really good, but there's some jarring imagery within there. Especially
Yeah.
like the one I think of is the issue where Alfred is basically fantasizing what would happen to Batman if he actually faced Bane.
It's awful. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's good stuff though.
And yeah, it's great stuff. Great stuff. However, if
You're like,
I'm
this is
including
vulgar and I can't get enough.
well, it's incredibly vulgar, but it what it does, which I think is effective, is it appears into the perspective of how Alfred interprets Bane as a threat and Batman as a legitimate actor. When I say legitimate actor, like able to go against this person. And it's very, very clear in his depiction that Alfred has incredible doubts. Incredible doubts. Do I think somebody who is a teenager, I won't say a teenager, is from 13 to 17, might be able to catch those intricacies? I think it's reasonable. Somebody under the age of 10, I'm not quite convinced. So, what do we do? In a situation where a 10-year-old will pick up that book is explicitly age locked by that student when they're picking it out. So, what the variable looks like is you can pull out that book if you would like, but you have to then go to the front, in this case, the library, and they already do this, by the way. I'm just explaining something that already exists, where you then present the book, the teacher, or not the teacher, so the library assistant takes your ID, they scan your ID, scan book, in the clear, case can be opened, and then you're given said reading material. If in this case for a 10-year-old, it wouldn't be able to be opened. It would just be, you're too young for this, or you're not in the right appropriate grade, or you're not even in the right appropriate subject matter to have access to this book right now. All fair things in a public library, in a school library. Now, in a public library, those variables don't exist in the same way. They can just get the book and read it and have at it. And that's kind of the nature of public libraries, generally speaking. So in that case, you can't really have like age gates in that regard, but you can have discretion in terms of a librarian, where they, again, already exists, that, hey, you need your parent to scan this book off for you to take home. Generally speaking, when you're in the confines of the library, there's really not much you can do. You can't really just like be omnipresent to go over the shoulder. But I think a system like that is probably reasonable and caters to your objections in terms of explicit material. You lock these books in a way where they can only be accessed through identification of a child's library card, and then in a public library, you just do like permission standpoint of like, hey, you can't take this, you can read this here, but if you take it out, you need permission. And if we catch you reading it in here for X or Y reason, there might be some type of consequence that we have to have a conversation with your parent about or something.
Well, and I'm nearly bored to tears with this, but this is the last thing I think I find interesting. I would add with that, maybe there's some, before the student can check out a book with violence, with this, with that, maybe they need to have some sort of a little like a learning, a training, or whatever else. It says, before we give you this book, there might be some thoughts in here that you're going to expose to that might be upsetting to you, and you might have some feelings about it, blah, blah, blah. So prep them for it, because a part of it also is it can be very jarring, and they also don't know what to do with those emotions when they happen. So just as a side, so I have two things. One, guys, Prime's been doing a fine job here. Why do I only see, it looks like 2 super chats? Like, what the fuck? And then 2, I got to get going a little bit here, but I'm free to stick around for probably another 15 minutes or so.
Sure, yeah.
I don't see any super chats here, but that's okay.
Oh, sorry for giving credit where none was due.
No worries. But it's fine. But this was, we can wrap things up. If anyone has anything else they want to say?
No, I think this was good. I do think that more stuff like this should happen. Obviously, the subject can be a little bit more open and less narrow. And hopefully people who watch it, I might do something with it after the fact, can get something out of it. But yeah.
I want to say, I will say there's so I'm relatively new to the debate space. I have a fairly public like career. Like, I'll drop my LinkedIn and stuff. Like, I don't hide who I am or where I'm at. I really do like good reason, passion discourse. I don't know, Joe and I, sometimes it's more of a chest thumping. I think this was a nice opportunity to actually engage with thoughts. And Prime, I think you did a great job hosting. Appreciate you here. And just in general, like, I try to bring to a panel being myself. And I try to always engage in good faith. So I appreciate Joe going along with this. Joe, I appreciate you taking the time to prep for this. I think we had some good debates here, good discussion points. We covered things from a lot of interesting angles. Even, I think a lot of the black box perspectives on AI are partially legitimate, and it's certainly a common thing to be looking at. And so I think in general, like, we did cover a lot of very relevant things, and I think that's really the best you can hope for with public discourse.
Absolutely. Hey, and I sent you a friend request on Discord because I'm actually interested in AI. You heard me be quite skeptical, because I'm skeptical as to where we apply it. But I'm actually quite interested, and I'd love to pick your brain sometime on that. But,
I'm gonna add you on there. I will say I am very easy to find, but Discord's a new environment for me. I've been on there more lately.
Okay.
all that to say, feel free at feel free to like X and LinkedIn. Honestly, so I was on a debate or discussion panel. Someone said, "Where can we find you?" And I said, "LinkedIn." And then they laughed and laughed and laughed because
send me in their DMs. Just send me your Twitter, and I'll check it out.
Yeah.
All right, I'll raid Wick. Actually, Wick is going on right now, so Wick is doing a thing. So I'm going to raid Wick. And just waiting for the 10-second countdown. It's always quite awkward while we do this. But enjoy your time with Wick. Just waiting for this to go. There we go. All right, off they go. Yeah.
There, I just sent you. I just sent you the message on Discord. Like I've been on there pretty active lately, so if you get there, that's fine. But